3, 2, 1. On the seventh day of Flipmas, Watchtower gave to me 7 halls of selling, 666 dedication, 5 golden apostasies, 4 publishers, 3 judicial hands, 2 witnesses, and part truth in an everlasting life tree. In the original song of the 12 Days of Christmas, that was rumored to be created as a covert way to remember the tenets of Christianity.
Though now debunked.
Yeah, but we're like over the hump now, so it's all downhill from here, so let's just ride it out. But in the song, the 12 Days of Christmas, the 7 swans a-swimming were said to represent the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Those 7 qualities are taken from Isaiah 11, 2 and 3.
And listing in order, they are wisdom, understanding, counsel, fortitude, knowledge, fear of the Lord, and piety.
Of course, the whole idea of these being the 7 gifts of the Spirit comes from Catholicism. But to highlight these as if they were the only gifts of the Spirit would be incorrect, since there are many gifts of the Spirit, as 1 Corinthians 12 illustrates.
And really, reading the context of Isaiah chapter 11 verse 1 shows just how the future Christ would apply these attributes when judging the lowly.
But these are the attributes said to be represented in the song, so we'll go with it. As we expound on these attributes, you'll notice we're not going to follow the Catholic explanation on these either, as they have long taken a mystical approach to explaining all these, instead of a practical one, which quite honestly, the Watchtower seems increasingly intent to follow Catholicism down this same exact rabbit hole, as they continue to give mystical, spiritual application to clearly practical biblical guidance.
Which of course just turns the Bible's clear, practical guidance into mystical hot air.
Which might be useful if you have a hot air balloon. Hey, can I get a hot air balloon?
No. And we'll juggle up the order a bit to aid in practical application, but realize we aren't presenting some dogmatic order.
I don't have to get like a totally huge one.
No!
So first we'll start with the fear of God. This often misunderstood statement is not fear in the normally defined sense of fear, since that would throw love out the window.
Think of it as fear of displeasing a good friend or a family member by doing something bad to them.
But more than that, Jehovah's boundaries set out for us aren't for his benefit, but they're for our own. Take, for example, Jehovah's law of gravity. Like a parent saying, don't go past this point right here because beyond that, there's a cliff. So this fear of God really sets the stage for any decision and molds our conscientious understanding.
The second attribute is piety. This word kind of gets a bad rap because of the related term pious, usually taken to mean religiously hypocritical, but really just means respect, or loving Jehovah's laws.
This attribute is important because external factors may weigh on our desire and tax our humility to love what Jehovah hates for us. For instance, we want to see the view of the canyon. We see the birds get to enjoy it, so I'm going to jump off that cliff like the bird and see it.
Sure, you'll get to enjoy the view for a bit, but most would agree in the long run it wouldn't end well.
The third attribute we're going to go with is knowledge, because it's among the easiest to achieve. It's kind of like the nuts and bolts necessary to make any assessment.
The fourth attribute is understanding. This is the assessment part. It processes that information, categorizing it to accurately understand it within the current circumstantial dynamics, as if roughly mentally organizing it into groups.
The fifth attribute, counsel, is closely linked with understanding, as it has to do with making the correct assessments, considering not just the information readily available in this specific instance, but it combines the current situational dynamics with what you already know, and even may consider other old or new information as references and comparison. It's like taking all the information, categorizing it, and then readying it for final assembly.
Sixth is fortitude, and implies the courage to do what's right, no matter what ridicule or abuses you know may come from carrying out the decision you have concluded in the aforementioned process.
And that seventh and last attribute is wisdom. And really, it's the result of action word. Because you can know exactly what's going on in the situation, assess it correctly in full love of God within His standards, and still not decide to do it. So it's only wisdom that actually carries it out.
So carrying out this 7-step process correctly can certainly lead to a successful outcome in God's eyes.
It's as we ended off in the 666 dedication video. To continue on, the Insight book says of the number 7.
7. 7 is used frequently in the scriptures to signify completeness. At times, it has reference to bringing a work toward completion, or it can refer to the complete cycle of things as established or allowed by God. And if you scroll down a little bit more, it says, the 7 congregations of Revelation with their characteristics give a complete picture of all the congregations of God on earth.
So to help us grasp this in real life, let's use a situation in our Flipmas application from the congregation.
Step 1, the fear of God, and 2, love for what He says, is a long-term process and comes into play well before any individual specific situation arises. It's like the foundation all the other steps are built on.
So we'll pick up here with the attribute of knowledge. It's 2014, and there's an announcement at the Kingdom Hall. And it relates to the good news that the branch is canceling all Kingdom Hall loans. But then later, the caveat comes out that the local Kingdom Halls were no longer to keep any funds on hand, but are to submit any funds on hand to the branch. Thereafter, not keeping any more in the local congregation account beyond a couple months' bills. As we recall, the ignorant sycophant majority was stating how loving it was for the branch to forgive the hall loan, with one elder stating to me specifically, coming up to me joyfully and saying, "What worldly bank would do that?" I guess, as they say, ignorance is bliss, perhaps even willful. Because just breaking down the nuts and bolts of the information of the knowledge they gave from stage, I heard, we're going to cancel your loan debt, and in exchange, you give us your savings and send us a payment perpetually. So applying understanding to that meant that every hall obviously paid down some of their loan debt, whatever the amount initially was. And if they had a savings, that meant that the amount the local congregation was bringing in was in excess of its bills and loan payment. Applying counsel to that meant taking in knowledge of not just the local congregation's financials right there, but also other halls' financial dynamics, and then grouping it all together.
Now, we don't claim to be the sharpest light bulbs in the drawer or have the best education. Nor do we have any expertise in finance or economics, or even have, or care to have, a record of all specific financial numbers. But we do have available to us God's biblical education, and quite a bit of info does pass over the average witness's eyes if they're paying attention.
So applying further counsel, we can see that while some congregations are fairly new, having a larger loan debt remaining, and perhaps even being smaller congregations barely covering their loan payments and bills, but we highly doubt the organization doesn't calculate the expense in all their checks and boxes that they have when they're setting up a new congregation, and whether or not that congregation can carry their own financial load.
With some despair for the branch, of course.
Of course. But factually speaking, many new congregations get a mixed bag of donated land and or boost donations from members and or large donations from other local congregations, etc. So the loan amounts from the branch are substantially less than the value of the hall in the first place.
Besides that, most congregations are pretty well established.
Right. In most cases, being there for decades, not having much of a loan debt at all, apart from maybe an occasional remodel or something. So most halls carry quite a bit of equity. Not only that, but the congregation itself is established, the people. So not only do they cover the pledge donations, voluntary donations, the bills, and any loan payment, but they're also able to put away a decent amount in savings. So to sum up all this attribute of counsel, let's take a hypothetical local average hall with an equity of about, $250,000, a loan debt of, say, $120,000, and a payment of $1,000 per month. Now, admittedly, that's based on straight ignorant numbers without any shady donation in and loan out numbers.
Like XYZ were donated to us, but we're going to charge you on loan for it.
Exactly. So based on those hypothetical meager numbers alone, anything over 10 years is money in the bank, because that's about how long it would take to pay off the loan with those numbers, and flips their previous no-interest loan into a money idolatry.
But next comes the final brick in the kingdom wall.
The branch now gets the deed to the halls, turning the owner into a renter that has to take care of the maintenance as well. And at 150,000 halls, it's not hard to see how that gives them equity in the billions of dollars to juggle and liquidate as needed, and otherwise add to decorate their asset tree.
But that's what the attribute of counsel is able to do.
Next is fortitude, which means having the silver bells to call it like it is. Like having the courage to hang the biggest set of Flipmas balls right on the front of the idolatry. Like taking the top of that idolatry and sticking it right up the asset decorated supposed saint. So when that elder said, "What worldly bank would do that?" I said something along the lines of, "You mean erase your debt in exchange for an increased payment that never ends and take the deed to your house?" Only every bank on the planet would jump at that deal.
So, using those 7 attributes allows a person to completely assess a situation and completely expose their complete takeover of the 7 congregations.
Now, to be clear, we couldn't have cared less. Our major share of donations went into our tank out in service, not into the boxes of the money changers.
So we weren't opposed to the adjustment, and we're confident there were probably good reasons for the adjustment.
Yeah, like their abusive policies and the governing body proclaiming itself as leader over all Jehovah's Witnesses, including in dictatorial and communist lands, which led to them getting sacked by the government.
So we get that there are surely several indiscreet reasons why they wanted to control the assets.
And we really don't mean to be flippant, but when you try to hide what's really going on with propaganda, flipping the real reasons to whitewash what's really going on behind the wall, you've entered the 8th day of Flipmas Watchtower gave to me 8 saints a milking, 7 halls a selling, 666 dedication, 5 golden apostasies. 4 publishers, 3 judicial hands, 2 witnesses, Empire Truth, and an everlasting life tree. We forgot to do that.
Dang it.